Right. Hello, everyone. It is 10 a.m. here on the west coast of the US, 1 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to go ahead and get started on time. I know that we'll have some more people joining us in the next few minutes. Also, up front, want to send out greetings to all of our supporters who are watching this recording. I know in particular the CCL semi-annual meeting is taking place at this time. So I know that we might have more people than normal actually watching the recording. So for those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Rick Wayman. I'm the CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our monthly community call for December 2022. What we want to do here is inspire you, inspire all of us, and move forward our work to create the political and public will to restore the climate. I think we might have a couple of new guests today who are new to the call. So I want to welcome you especially, but also just give you a quick rundown of what's going to happen on today's call. So in just a couple minutes, I will introduce our guest speaker, John Fitzgerald. Hi, John. John has a deep breadth and knowledge of the climate landscape, and his work spans decades in the trenches in Washington, D.C. John will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So please do be thinking of questions you'd like to ask John. Then we will do a quick spotlight on a grassroots team. And this month, I'm really excited to hear a little bit about the Philadelphia chapter. After that, Terry will run us through a training with a focus on writing letters to the editor on behalf of the CREST Act. So we're going to hear a little bit about the CREST Act from John. We'll have some great opportunity to engage in discussion and Q&A with him about the CREST Act. But basically, that act has built some momentum in the past week, but in the past weeks, and there was a brief discussion in committee on Wednesday, so it's exciting to see that momentum, and we've got an opportunity right now to act on it. So as you know, we urge all of our chapters to connect with your fellow team members immediately after every monthly community call to write letters and plan other actions. So this month, we would love for you to focus on having time as a team to start writing letters to the editor in your breakout room. So if you don't have a chapter yet, don't worry. You are more than welcome to join other teams. Just hang out at the end of the call and we can get you in with an existing chapters meeting. They're all very welcoming, very lovely people. Okay, so as of now, we have requests from Pacific Northwest and North Bay, California for breakout rooms. If you didn't request a breakout room yet and you'd like one, just write breakout in the chat along with your chapter name, and we'll be sure to get you set up. I also am very excited to announce that we've booked Jessica Wilson of Carbon Cure to come speak to us at our January 7th community call. And that actually is going to wrap up our first full year of these monthly calls. So really excited to have Jessica here. Carbon Cure is doing really incredible work, and it's really exciting to see the momentum that they've built. One more thing I want to mention, if you know of anyone else who's looking for a way to make a difference on the climate, urge them to attend our intro call, which happens the second Tuesday of every month. This month, our intro call will be on Tuesday, December 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. So that's in about a week and a half from now. So plenty of advance notice to get people signed up for that call. If I'm not looking at the chat right now, but if Terry hasn't put that link in the chat yet, she will momentarily. Again, that's the link for people to register for the intro call. So now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Please join me in welcoming to our monthly community call, John Fitzgerald, legal advisor to Methane Action, who has truly had an immense impact on caring for our Earth in so many ways over the past 4+ decades. Again, everyone should be thinking of questions that you want to ask John after his opening remarks. But John, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. Please go ahead and begin.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you, Terry, for the invitation. This is a great opportunity. I really admire the way Foundation for Climate Restoration has reached out and established chapters across the country and beyond. I think it's really a truly remarkable development in a very few years. And my email address is greenknights.law@gmail.com. And the reason it is Green Knights plural is that no one of us ever does anything alone. It is always in cooperation with others. So no matter how good we might be, we can't get anything done without someone else working with us. And so that's the way we go forward. And this is a great example of that. And so thank you for all the kind words, Rick. But in everything I was able to do was always because we had good partners and folks we could work with on the Hill who'd be willing to listen and then use some of the ideas we brought. So with that, I'll try to be relatively modest, and I need to be, because I think a lot of folks in this call know more about the CREST Act than I do. They may know more about the Inflation Reduction Act, but let's explore those two things together primarily. The CREST Act, as you know, Rick, and as most of you do, was introduced before the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. And as you may recall, folks, the Inflation Reduction Act was basically 1/3 of what was originally the Build Back Better bill. People started with a massive amount of money proposed for all kinds of things, and we ended up with still a massive amount of money for many different things, including climate change. But we'll start with the CREST Act, because that was a very focused, and is a very focused act. And the momentum that Rick was just talking about was that this week in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, as you may know, chaired by Manchin of West Virginia in the Senate, they had a very quick hearing on a number of different bills, and also votes to nominate and move to the floor the nomination of 3 persons for the Department of Energy and for Interior. I think it was BLM maybe. In any case, the very fact that they had a legislative hearing, however brief it was, sets that thing up for markup, for when the committee actually decides to report out a bill or amend it and then report it out. And so we were in discussions from Methane Action and others with Maria Cantwell about the possibility not only of implementing the CREST Act for carbon dioxide, but also adding a title for methane removal. People aren't as familiar with methane removal as they are with the several years of work on carbon dioxide removal, maybe a couple of decades if you go back to Klaus Lackner's early work and all that. So that's better understood, but there are opportunities for great progress in both. We'll see if that happens. But we have in the lame duck session a few weeks in which this Congress can enact things like CREST if it so chooses. And so just to go be very brief about it, CREST sets aside not a lot of money, but enough to get research done in a variety of different carbon removal technologies, both aquatic and geological and biomass and atmospheric, and to measure and basically calculate the net carbon dioxide removal. And then it sets up a process for the Secretary of Energy to buy that stored carbon dioxide from those who remove it, creating a new market, a market that will be stable, that will have a set amount of money dedicated for a purchase, so that in case folks can't find a market someplace else, there'll be one at DOE within the limited funds available. Now, it's a very, very, very useful process to start off something as early in the technology development as this is, even though it's much more advanced than many other things. So the fact that on that day we had a hearing, but also we had Senator King of Maine, where I live, co-sponsor the bill and speak in favor of it and say we cannot solve the climate change problem without removing greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. It's the longest lived one, but just to make sure you know, methane, which lasts about 12 years, but has an impact for 20 somehow, the way physics work, is about 80 times as powerful a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide is in that impact period. EPA has measured it over 100 years. Methane's gone generally, but nature hasn't been able to keep up with that removal of methane. So now we have methane at more than twice the level we generally have had in history, about 2 parts per million. Usually it was at 0.76 parts per million until a couple, 3 decades ago. So we've got to try to remove those high impact, short-lived planet pollutants as well, and as fast as we can to give us some time to get carbon dioxide down. So what do we stand? We have the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act was just passed. That, if I can shift to that, literally provides billions of dollars for greenhouse gas removal, measurement, reporting in several sectors. 3 programs within the U.S. Department of Agriculture, oil and gas pollution, including specifically legacy pollution, which means essentially the methane that is left behind when you pull oil and gas out of the ground and ship it in pipelines that leak, and a variety of community assistance programs that EPA can offer with a great deal of flexibility. That's a massive amount of money. And it's our hope that the administration can use the funds in the IRA in a very constructive way, in a creative way, and fund the same kind of removal, experimentation, measuring, development, and deployment that we have in the CREST Act. They have a lot of flexibility in the administration to use those funds in a variety of ways. It's not as targeted as CREST Act, but if we don't get the CREST Act, we're going to try to make progress with the current IRA. And there's some also in the Infrastructure Act that preceded it. And we'll keep working on this, but there's obviously a lot of momentum. We obviously have a lot of members of Congress who are very sharp and know we need these things. And so your letters to the editor, your calls, your letters to members of Congress can make a big difference. Letters to the editor, can spark a lot of other things. When I worked in Congress, my boss used to say, a phone call means 5 other families are caring about the same issue. A letter to me means 10 families are caring about that issue, but only one took the time to write. A letter to the editor can spark 10 times that if people respond and they see it in the paper and they say, oh, people are caring about this. So I advise you to listen to Terry carefully and do what she says to do and reach out to members of Congress through the papers or directly, and also ask as many questions as you like, and I'll try to answer them. But this CREST Act, as you know, is just one of several bills in both houses, especially in the House side, we have 2 or 3, to try to address carbon removal and give it a boost. But we have a good start in the IRA, even if we don't get these passed in this very short remaining time in Congress. And there's hope that because these are win-win solutions for almost everybody across the board, even in the next Congress, we may get progress in these areas. So I'll stop right there.
Right, amazing. Thank you so much, John. This is really fascinating stuff, and I am really grateful for you sharing your knowledge and experience with us. So we've got a solid 15 minutes here for questions. So a lot of you are seasoned on calls like this, and I see Tom and Melanie are modeling how we go about our Q&A. If you go down to the reactions tab on your Zoom and click the raise hand button, we'll get you in the queue to jump in on Q&A. So Tom, I've got you first. Please go ahead.
So a couple of questions. The Inflation Reduction Act and CREST, they've both been passed by Congress, right? They both are the bill's been signed, or neither one, or
No, sir.
neither one. I thought
no.
they were.
I'm glad you asked the question. Oh, wait. Oh, let me slow down. The Inflation Reduction Act was enacted in late August. And in that act, they have 180 days to start allocating those funds. And we're very quickly approaching that date. So that's a very active program that's been enacted. The CREST Act has just made a little progress in the hearing of the committee to which it was referred when it was introduced. It still has to be reported out of that committee, taken to the Senate floor, and then enacted by the House, passed by the House, I mean. and hopefully in the same form, so they can sign it into law right away. But
So
it's got
for the
several
I-
steps to go, so it's a
For-
very different posture.
For IRA, when is the 180 days done? When does that run out? For the IRA?
Oh, that's very, roughly 6 months from August,
6 months from August, February.
roughly.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so it's coming right up.
Okay.
So one thing we're trying to ask members to do, members of Congress, that is to write the administration and say, how can we work with you to make sure that our communities, our organizations, profit and nonprofit alike, and our universities can apply for these funds and put them to work right away? How can we design a user-friendly interface where people can say, I know this technology and I'm willing to try it, or a lab can say, you know, we can do this. We can do these kind of experiments. How do we get the money? So, here's something else. This is a very unusual law. It's a reconciliation bill that lasts almost a decade. That's why I can allocate billions of dollars for these different programs over about 9 years. I'll stop there.
Who do we talk to about the allocations? Congress or agency like DOE? Who do we talk to?
Both.
Okay.
It's always a good thing. When we used to get a letter from a constituent in our office, when I worked for a member of Congress in Michigan, if we couldn't answer it right away, or if it was mostly about what an agency could do, we put a buck slip on it, we call it. We send it to the agency, would you please answer this constituent and give us a copy of your answer? And that went in and sat on the top inbox of the assistant administrator because it was from Congress, and they got on it. So you want to talk to both.
Right.
Thank you, John.
That's great advice, John. Thanks.
You bet.
Okay, Melanie and then Richard.
Thanks, Rick. Tom, I just also would say, check out your state equivalent of Department of Energy and state folks as well, because they'll likely be looking at what is that piece of the IRA look like for us, specifically where we're at. I know in Colorado, we have a meeting like that scheduled with officials. So, John, thank you for the presentation. And did I understand you correctly that the CREST Act is one of the things that they are going to be moving on this session before they break?
What I said was, we did not know that they were going to even have a hearing on it. They'll need to have a markup. They'll need to report it to the floor of the Senate. They'll need to have the House either accept it at the desk and enact it as passed by the Senate, or do its own markup. They can do it. I'm not sure that they will, but there is movement at least, so there's hope.
Great, thank you. And also, I understand that, well, I'm curious if you have heard of any conversation as they're looking at the CDRLA bill and CREST Act of kind of putting those together or reworking to come up with something that kind of covers a broader area. Have you heard about those type of conversations actually going on? And
Well, we've been trying to do something like that for some time. Like I said, trying to add methane to the CREST Act, and also trying to make sure that folks on the House side know that we can address several pollutants with some of these technologies, not just one. However, to merge those bills takes some time. In a markup, you could do that with amendments lined up, but they only have so many weeks left. They've got to pass an appropriations bill to keep the government running by the 16th of December. And they literally are running out of time. The new Congress starts January 3rd. These guys want to go home for Christmas, so there's not a lot of time left. So I don't know whether they're going to be able to merge these bills like that. I rather doubt it.
thank you.
You bet.
Right. Okay, over to Richard.
So I'm just really actually wondering, I don't know if it's really a question, is with the Inflation Reduction Act, if that is something that could potentially be, I don't know, what's the right word for it, basically eliminated or seriously trimmed down by, future administrations or legislatures.
Very good question. That's a very good question. In complete theory, it might be. It could be. However, first off, the administration will be able to veto anything that would try to do anything like that because Biden has plenty of support in both houses to sustain a veto. So he could veto something, even if he hasn't got a majority, he can sustain a veto. Secondly, once those agencies start allocating stuff and making contracts and grants, it's awfully hard to pull that line back in when it's already out there and the bait's been taken, the fish has swallowed it and swam away. You know, it's a program that's ongoing and it's very unlikely they're going to undo that. They'll try. And the third thing is Richard Nixon once tried to refuse to spend money that Congress had authorized and appropriated. He wouldn't obligate the funds. They passed an they made that basically illegal and even the courts backed that up. So once the funds are appropriated, you have to spend them. Now you can sometimes say, we can't figure it out. And then there's an accommodation reached with Congress, but it's usually pretty much a done deal once it's appropriated. And the Reconciliation Act actually authorizes and appropriates in the same bill, which is very relatively unusual.
Thanks. That
You
helps.
bet.
All right, let's see, I've got Alan next.
Mute. I'm wondering, given the likelihood of a Republican House, specifically from California, are you finding any Republican representatives that would be in favor of the CREST bill? What's your read on that?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think you can almost always find some folks in either party to try a little something. Unless the leadership says, no, we're not going to do this. We are as a party are going to stand firm on this, in which case they try to get the whips to line them up and make sure they all vote the right way. I don't see this as being as controversial as something that would rise to the level of having an entire leadership, the Speaker of the House, for example, saying, no, we're not going to do this. I do think, as I said before, there's a lot in this bill that both sides, all across the spectrum, the oil companies, the other, the makers of limestone using captured carbon dioxide, like they did in the San Francisco airport roof, a lot of win-wins across the board here. And so I think there's a fair chance that we could get this in the next Congress, particularly because the amount of money in the CREST Act is not at all huge. It's enough to do a good program, but it's not break the bank big.
And from what I'm seeing, the co-sponsors are Cantwell's a Democrat, Angus is an independent, and Senator Cassidy is a Republican. So it is across the board and bipartisan.
Is he from California? Cassidy?
And so is Colin.
California.
Louisiana?
That's in the Senate.
And Colin, one of the original co-sponsors or sponsor is from Maine and is a Republican, known as an independent Republican, but she is a Republican.
Melanie, I saw your hand flash up for a second. Was that just related to the comment you put in chat, or did you have something else as well?
That was it.
Okay, great. Well, John, I've actually got a question for you because we've got a few minutes left here. So bills like these are clearly extremely important for building up solutions as they're kind of in their infancy and hopefully working on scaling up. Another very important part of building solutions is social acceptance. And so I'm just wondering if you're aware of any opportunities within perhaps things like the CREST Act or the IRA, or maybe some other DOE funds or other government funds to support things like NGO work to build out educational efforts around greenhouse gas removal solutions.
That's a very good question, Rick. And in the IRA, there are at least a couple of fairly large provisions that are open to non-government organizations, community-based groups, small towns, they don't say small, but municipalities. And the breadth of those programs, I don't remember off the top of my head, but they specifically made some funds available for nonprofit organizations. So the answer is yes. And the question is, what can they do? And I'm sure that public education, public training is part of that. Because that's what NGOs are for, in large part, is to educate, research and educate.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll certainly be digging deeper into that. But
Well, I sent
yeah.
you a copy. I sent a copy to Terry of these selected provisions from the 730-page act that I read 3 times. And you should be able to go down through that 21-page document and figure out, yeah, it's here, it's 21 pages, I got it all. And see which one fit.
I
right,
put that in the chat. If you're looking at it, it's in the chat for you. That provisions one that
All
he's
right.
talking about.
Amazing. 21 is a lot more digestible than 730.
Yeah, that's why I took the pieces out that we can use for removals.
Yeah.
And they're
yeah.
not all directly saying let's remove. Some of the phrases are addressing, mitigating legacy pollution. Well, that means getting rid of it. And some are specifically saying different types of removal, like in agriculture. And others are saying restore the degraded environment. Well, if you fix the climate, you're restoring the degraded environment. So the agencies have a lot of flexibility with these terms.
So John, I have another kind of general question for you. It came as a little bit of a surprise to me that that national legislation was picking up so, in my mind, quickly on removals. I thought it was going to take a little bit more effort on the subnational level before we got there. What you've got decades of experience in DC. I'm just curious what you've seen as maybe some of the driving forces behind that, and whether there's anything we can do as advocates to keep building on that momentum.
Rick, that's a really another good question, because even in the world where people understand anything about removal, they really only know about CO2, and they only know a couple of ways of doing it, and there are many ways. They know almost nothing about methane removal, but in April, the last couple of weeks of April, last week of April mostly, and the first week of May, Peter Jenkins, who's the chairman of the board of the Methane Action Group, of which I'm counsel, and an old colleague of mine, Peter and I worked on a number of things together. He still lives in Bethesda, right near DC. We basically lined up as many one-on-one meetings as we could with either one staffer or a group of 3 or 4 staffers. For instance, with the environment, I'm sorry, there's a big storm going on here, and so I'm a bit distracted by the wind smacking the rose bushes against the window. But anyway, we briefed about 30 different staffers, mostly the committee staff or key member staff, who are going to be writing the IRA, and they've begun to write it. Actually, 2 Senate staffers beginning to work on this in 2019 together, figuring out what different pieces might fit together and what would deliver what kind of help in the whole energy and climate area. But removal was something, like, as you say, it is not a very familiar thing. So we basically provided to them a catalog of about a dozen different ways of removing methane and sometimes CO2 and methane and other greenhouse gases together, an illustrated catalog, research needs, and some peer-reviewed papers, but we broke it down for them in hour-long meetings in April and May. And we had begun some time before that, actually, in sending written budgets for possible inclusion in the reconciliation bill. And we repeated that, sending those to the authorizing committees, much like we normally would and did for the appropriations process. And so I don't know how many other groups were doing that, but we made some really good progress because we managed to get them to sit down and pay attention for a whole hour. And that's hard to do with some of the Hill staff, but we did. And we gave them stuff that you can understand, a picture of a ship, putting up in its exhaust gases a little bit of highly pulverized iron dust to do exactly what nature does with the dust that's blown off the Sahara, which is to mix it with sun and the salt sea spray and oxidize methane out of existence. That's just one of many ways of doing this. And they can see that and say, oh, here are the peer-reviewed papers supporting that. Let's give this a shot. So I have to say, I don't know of any other removal education efforts, but I think some of that paid off. And in fact, Shelley Pingree, who chairs the Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior and Environment, which funds EPA and the Interior Department, she led a briefing for members of Congress's staff and senior agency people in September of this year. She led it off and she said, you'll look at the IRA. I helped work on that. She serves in the Ag Committee. And after we briefed her staff, and after we briefed Ro Khanna's staff from California, they said, well, we serve on the Agriculture Committee. We can probably do something with this. And lo and behold, that's the section that specifically mentions different kinds of removal from methane and carbon dioxide and other nitrous oxide in the ag programs. And so I think she took it seriously and really went to it. And so you can see that webinar on our website, also Methane Action, if you poke around enough. Sir David King of Cambridge University was the second lead speaker. So I'll stop there. But maybe we didn't do it all, but at least we tried and maybe we had an impact.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great, John. And I think it really illustrates the power that a few people can really have. You know, that was not a massive effort with hundreds of thousands of signatures on petitions or whatever. You know, this was a few knowledgeable people getting into the right channels. So really happy to hear about that.
We also gave them, Rick, what we also gave them was letters signed the previous year by dozens of scientists and policy experts calling for the research and development of methane removal and other greenhouse gas removal and an international way of governing that practice. So it's not withheld arbitrarily, it's not overdone or done wrong. So those letters were out there and we were able to say, it's not just us two lawyers talking to you about this, it's all these scientists all over the world who know this stuff cold, and it's all these policy people, former White House staff were signing that letter. I happen to know some of them, but you know, they know each other and they said, this is good stuff, let's go for it. So it was a combination of things, you know, not just a few, but you're right. It took a few to deliver it in a way that was useful.
Yeah, great. Okay, over to Thomas.
Sorry. Yeah, would this bundle of papers be available somewhere to approach lawmakers in other countries?
Would you start your sentence again? The first few words I missed, I'm sorry.
These materials, like the paper plus the statements by the scientists and so on, is this a bundle available somewhere so we could approach
Absolutely.
lawmakers elsewhere?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And we need to do that. And some of them are already on the website of Methane Action. The catalog of research needs, we need to update, but it's still pretty darn good. The latest version is June. And I don't think that's on the website, but I can certainly send it to Terry and she can send it around. And that's a really useful document because a lot of us learn best through pictures as well as text. And this shows examples of these different methods, whether it be filters or whether it be oxidizing over the open ocean, these kind of things. So yes, this is all available because we're a not-for-profit too, and designed to educate the public.
And Tomas, I can go through.
By the way,
Oh, I'm sorry. I can make
one
sure
more
that you get
point.
these documents.
Other
too.
countries. Yeah. Speaking of other countries, we'll be commenting on the advice given at COP27 part of the way. By March 15th, I think the deadline is for methods of removing greenhouse gases in developing countries with the help of developed countries, either for purposes of paying for them to remove that material, those gases, or helping one country or the other to meet its nationally determined commitments under the Paris Agreement as carried forward in COP27. And that's Article 6.4, part of the Paris Agreement. They wanted more advice on how to approach that, how to use that. And that's another way we're going to be basically providing a lot of this information to countries around the world.
That's great. Thanks, John. And so just to be clear to everyone, Terry is really great at collating documents and making sure everyone has access to what they need. John, as soon as Terry gets that from you, she will, yes, she promises to give you all the documents. Okay, over to Cynthia.
Well, I'm just a little bit confused because a couple of months ago, I read the article about the ocean fertilization, whatever you want to call it. Well, where you put the iron dust into the ocean.
Mhm.
Well, the thing is, I thought it said that there had not been enough research on it yet to really emphasize this. So are you saying that
Actually-
something new's happened?
He's talking about a different aspect. He's talking about the methane reduction, which is different from the one you're thinking
I can
of.
talk about both of them.
Okay,
Oh, good. Great.
You're-
Thank you.
Terry's right, but I will talk about both, just briefly, because they're very closely related. The original ocean iron fertilization was for CO2 removal through the enhancement of ocean life, and that continues to be researched. And many people said that the initial research and some of the projects that have been done since then weren't as well designed as they could have been. It's always true with science. You keep doing it better and better. But just last week, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, based in Seattle, Washington, published a paper saying, this is good stuff. If we refine this iron just the right way, we can get a powerful amount of CO2 removed. And here's the other point. If you begin with lifting the iron in, say, a ship's smokestack, where they already have some iron in the ship's fuels, the heavier fuels do that, 22 parts per million, but it's enough to make a difference, we think. If you added some, that iron, instead of throwing it right on the water, would go just a few hundred yards into the lower atmosphere, not very high. And as it drifts down, and it would stay in the air until it's rained out, it's so light and fine. Those aerosols are so tiny that they're exposed themselves to an awful lot of methane on the way down. And in the process, the salt sea spray, the chlorine in the salt, the sun, and the air exposure to the iron takes the methane, destroys it, makes it into water and a little tiny bit of CO2, just like nature would. And so then it settles on the surface of the ocean, and you may have the beginning of the CO2 part, when it fertilizes the phytoplankton, the plants upon the ocean, which then are eaten by the zooplankton, which then are eaten by the slightly larger critters, all the way up to the baleen whales, like the northern right whale. And so we need more research, but we're making great headway. And I was glad to see that paper last week. So
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel so much better.
yes, and I put that in the chat.
Me
so you
too.
guys can see the article that I found that talks about it from the government. We said all along we were interested in these things if there was scientific backing. This is the least part of the scientific backing we've been waiting for.
yeah,
Absolutely. All right. Well, John, thank you so much. It's truly a delight to have had you today as our guest speaker. I know you're really busy, but please feel free to stay on for a little bit more of the call if you can. But on behalf of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, I'm just so grateful for your inspiring work and your dedication to finding solutions for climate change. Thank you, John.
well, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Terry, and thank you all, because I'm grateful for your work. Like I said before, this is great stuff. Keep it up. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
we
so
will.
much.
Thanks, John. All
You bet.
right, so we are going to move into the next part of our call. And the first thing I want to do is just a couple of announcements and updates. So since our chapters were started last October, we've had now 15 letters to the editor published and 44 meetings with elected officials as well as 2 tabling events. So we may have had more and you just haven't reported them yet. So please make sure to report your meetings, your published media, and your outreach events directly to Terry by email, and also by going to the website reporting portal. So we've got that link in the chat for the website reporting portal. Please use it and make sure that you let Terry know. So during our grassroots appreciation talk this month, Terry really wanted to showcase another one of our teams. And this is difficult because all of our teams are doing incredible work and they each deserve attention and distinction for what they're doing. But really this month, we wanted to single out Vic Comfer, Richard Cole, and the new Philadelphia chapter during this grassroots appreciation talk. So Terry, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk about the Philadelphia team because it's been really exhilarating to see their efforts grow. It doesn't happen over a week. It doesn't happen over a month. This sometimes can take a while to develop, though Texas was pretty fast, if I recall. Most of the teams take a little more time. And I'm really excited to be showcasing Richard Cole, Vic Comfer, Eloise and Dick, and Peter of the Philadelphia chapter. The members have been interested in us for a while, but had not had an opportunity to launch the Philadelphia team yet. You would recognize Richard Cole, who's on the call right now, and so is Vic. If you've attended our Wednesday meetings, he's usually there. He's been a fixture at those meetings for months now. Richard asks questions. He pays close attention to detail. He follows through in passionate detail. I'm going to use the word again. I was pleased when Vic Comfer also connected and agreed to bring his highly effective team into creating a chapter with Richard. Vic's group brings experience and follow through as well, and real, it sounds like long-term involvement. They already have their sights set on local work within the Philadelphia area to the old Hillco plant. Did I say that correctly? Okay. The idea that the Philly team has in mind is attracting a Blue Planet style facility to the plant and help to revive the area in an equitable fashion. This impressed me for many reasons, but one of the most exciting for us is that this would be truly an equitable project for our local teams to be focused on. And I think that everybody can be replicating this. They found a way to reduce future CO2 emissions, search for healthy, sane jobs, and revitalize an area in their own zone that needs support. So I think that's something really relevant and that I wanted everybody, yeah, that's right. Thank you, Melanie. That's definitely a finger wave. Not only that, but the group seems to have a cohesion that can only be described as vibrant. And they have only met in person for the first time this week as a chapter of F4CR, but they have proved they are already an integral part of following through on our mission, which is, of course, to bring down the amounts of greenhouse gases. I won't say CO2, I'll say greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. So I just really, really wanted to take a moment out to finger wave and appreciate the Philadelphia team. Yay, you guys. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you to the Philadelphia team. It's really exciting to hear what you're up to. Can't wait to hear all that you accomplish in the coming months. Okay, so let's jump right into the training. This is one of my favorite things, letters to the editor. So Terry, let's see, you are going to put the December action sheet link in the chat. I just saw that pop up. So each month we have a brief training or teach a new laser talk. But here I'm delighted to turn it over back to Terry Pugh, our Director of Civic Engagement, to lead this particular training session. Terry, as always, thank you so much for your excellent work and your leadership and your support of the chapters. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate when you say that, but I always feel a little embarrassed because everybody on the call does so much. It would be nice if we could go through and name everybody by name, but when I get a thank you like that, you guys should just sit there and gloat for a moment and feel like that's you, because it's all of our work that gets us somewhere. So thank you, Rick. The December action sheet is in the chat, and hearing John speak to us this month about the important things that are going on with the Inflation Reduction Act, or just discussing the CREST Act and how we can do something now that can have an impact during the lame duck session is so important. It's a vital, important aspect of our work, and we can really have an impact if we dive into this now. This action is not one that needs to be worked on for weeks. We're just talking about writing a letter to the editor and making sure that we follow through with the letter and turn it in. You can't help whether it gets printed or not, but at least writing one and having it ready to go is what we're trying to do. And today is the day to start it, if not finish it in one day. So I would like to take a moment out at this time to also point out that Richard Cole has apparently already written his, and he's got it formatted, and a few of us, I think the Philadelphia chapter, and I was still on the list, so I got to see, are going to be looking it over and seeing what he wrote. So just so you guys recognize that this is something we can do it now, we can have an impact. And it's also going to get us further on helping the CREST Act, getting that forward. As we know from David Cunard, it's really important to get the CREST Act moving forward. He was talking about how the Citizens Climate Lobby is also prioritizing this. So I rewrote everything last night to make sure that it pointed toward the CREST Act. So the December action sheet only talks about the CREST Act and writing a letter to the editor. Is it possible for someone to who has access to room on their screen to be able to read the take action section for us on writing a letter to the editor? Does anybody have their screen open and it would be easy to read the take action section and how to write the letter to the editor? Let's see, anybody have their hand up? I see Melanie does. Thank you, Melanie.
Sure. So let me share the screen here.
Oh.
Although, okay. How's that?
I could see a blank screen. Good job.
Yeah, my computer is so darn slow.
No, that's amazing. Actually, Melanie, I never ask anybody to share their screen. You are so on top of it. Thank you. That's amazing.
Sure. Now, do you want me to read or would you like someone else to read?
I'm just so impressed that you just shared your screen. Go ahead, you can read.
All right. There's a path we can make from here to a future with hope. As a final point, I started by saying that we have a credibility problem, but we also have the ability to address it. And if anyone doubts that we can summon the political will to do what is necessary and to save our future, always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Al Gore, COP27, November 7th, 2022. Sharm El Sheikh, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, that was amazing.
Okay.
Actually, thank you so much for reading that, because I always wonder, is anybody reading the top of these action sheets? So I really appreciate that you did that. Could you go down to the bottom now and read from Take Action? Is that possible? Oh,
Let's see. Take
that's
action.
wonderful. Thank you.
You know, I'm not seeing it there.
Yours is being fussy.
Oh, here it is.
Yes, perfect.
Take action. Oh, does somebody else have it and want to read it? Please. Write a letter to the editor, LTE for short. Our focus will be to gain U.S. senators who will co-sponsor Senate Bill 4420, the CREST Act, introduced by Senator Collins, Republican from Maine, and Cantwell, Democrat in Washington.
Thank you so much. That's perfect. Now, I'll just kind of run through the rest because we're going to run out of time, but This is going to be a process that we've gone over a few times, but there are new members, so I want to make sure I cover all of it. First, you want to go through your local paper, the paper that you want to write to, and make sure that you learn what their requirements are for a letter to the editor. And you can also Google the name of the paper and the letter to the editor guidelines. That's now the fastest way. It used to be really a simple matter. They'd kind of write the rules right next to the opinions, but that's shifted now and everything is done with Google. So note the number of words that are allowed and how a letter is submitted. And do you submit it on the newspaper's website, or do they have an email address they want you to send it to? Those are all important factors. And I know that many of you are seasoned and you already know this, but it's really important to go over every once in a while. And think about the placement. Do you want it to be in a large daily paper? For me, I'm next to the Seattle Times. I've sent in a few letters, nothing's been printed. So I keep trying now the Tacoma News, because I'm figuring that it might be easier to get my foot in the door with the Tacoma News, which is a smaller paper. Choose whatever works for you. Some people choose a weekly paper in their area to communicate with on this front. So pick whatever means the most to you and what will work for you. But remember, when you're sharing your opinion in a paper, you're having an impact like John McKnight Fitzgerald said, it's going to be a huge impact if you can get in a paper. So I'm not caring which paper I get into. I just want in a paper. And then write your letter. Use the guidelines that the newspaper has provided and share why you believe that we must focus on both getting to net zero emissions and removing legacy carbon, or just talk about the CREST Act. You don't need to talk about anything more than you want to. You can literally cut and paste parts of this action sheet into your letter if that will work for you and stay within the guidelines. Make sure that you ask your US senators to co-sponsor S4420 or the CREST Act. And report back and share with us if your letter is published. Let us know by contacting me and share send me the link to your shared media. So if you're posted in, if you're published in your paper, make sure that I get a link to that so I can put it on our records and we can show that we've had an impact. So those are the important things. Does anybody offhand have ideas of something that you'd want to try with your own paper, or any ideas of how you would start a letter to the editor?
Well, here in the Houston, Texas area, we have some people that are probably going to be involved in that. I and another person are going to try to do an in-person visit to a local office, Texas District 2.
Rita Tolson is the George T. and Harry E. Flegger professor.
But there are others who are not in that district. So I am going to try to use these guidelines to get others who are not in Texas District 2 to write some letters to their.
That's profound. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. And these things are, the reason why I like the breakout rooms is after we're done with this part of the call, when you're all excited about the idea and you've heard the official speaker tell us why it's important, doing what Tom just described is the best part. Working as teams, you can kind of get more of an impact and more letters out there. I've been writing alone, so I can't say that I've had as much of an impact as I'd like. Our Pacific Northwest team hasn't been having a letter to the editor meetings, and I think that that's one thing we should start doing, because when you work with another person as you're writing it, you can kind of toss ideas around. Some of the most profound moments I had were with Sally and Philip and the North Bay team as we wrote out original letters to just connect with our officials. It's really important to be able to do that. And that's part of why this is so special and so important to do. Yes, Sally, go ahead. Oh, I think you're muted.
When you said what do we think might be a good lead in? I'm thinking, I want to, climate folks, we have a great opportunity right now.
Mhm.
Here it is.
That's-
There's this CREST Act. I don't know how to, you know, put the detail in.
I love that. The first
Yeah,
sentence
but
is
here's
made.
the, come on, we got a really good opportunity. We got a couple weeks here where we could really make a difference with our Congress people. And here's the opportunity. There's this, you know, and get a really good solid paragraph, which that's the hard part for me on the detail, but you know, that kind of energy of knowing, you know, assuming that people are gonna want to do this.
That's beautiful. And I'm really realizing how much I've missed you since you've been gone on the long walk. You haven't been here for months, but yes, that's an excellent way to start one. That's a great one. What's the name of the walk you just went on?
Camino de Santiago.
There we go. Months long walk. There we go. Jim was on it too. Yay.
Jim was really on it.
Yeah. Thank you, both of you. That's perfect.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate that, Sally. Thank you. And Richard, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so am I understanding that you have an actual separate, or will have an actual separate letter writing group? Because it's just a couple few things I wanted to mention, but I don't want to take up time if that's the case.
What happens usually when this part of the meeting ends, it's only got like 3 more minutes, then we switch over to a meeting room. But since we're such a small team, actually at this point, our meeting room is one breakout room. We always wind up all crashing in on the North Bay team.
Oh, yeah.
If you'd like to, you'd be welcome to crash in as well. And we could go over the ideas that you have, since you've recently written one. I mean, you're the only one I know who wrote one this week.
Well, there's just a few comments, really.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I've written like 7, 8 letters to the editor for various things like the methane rule, et cetera. So in my experience, first of all, I do local papers. The Philadelphia Inquirer is a huge paper, well-known in our area. It's hard to get things with them, and it's only 150 words that they take. 250 for the rest of our papers, pretty much. But I also send to statewide papers. Okay, I think that's important. The other thing is it can be a challenge to know whether or not your letter is published. And they say, well, call and find out, you know, but that usually never really results in anything. You're not going to find out unless, in my case, I know people from a number of different organizations. And like I've had people within my chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby Group, you know, notify me, hey, you know, here's the link to your letter. And so I'll know that way. Another thing is to try, like it was said, to get input from other people, not just for ideas, but just to get another set of ideas or another set of eyes on your letter before you send it out. And another thing is some papers or publishers, whatever, they like to see reference by I don't know what they call it, link, hyperlink. I don't know, because I have not figured out how to do that. Where you're referencing an article from.
Oh, yes,
you know,
that's a
yeah.
great way to do it. Actually, we're running out of time. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much for that. Let me send it back to you, Rick, since we're at the end of the call.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, I don't have a lot to say in the way of closing other than thank you all for another really fantastic call. I'm leaving more energized, more inspired, and I'm actually going to write a letter to the editor this weekend. I don't know what my base article is to base it off of, but I'm going to go find something today. Thank you all again for joining us. Really looking forward to our next call on January 7th, Saturday the 7th, where we will have a speaker from Carbon Cure joining us. Thanks again to John Fitzgerald for all of your insights, your wisdom, your fantastic work. And thanks to each of you for your dedication. So with that, those who need to sign off now, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, a bunch of people are going to hang out and get going on some letters. So please feel free to stick around as well. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Terry, you want to stop the recording?
That's the recording.